years ago, somehow relief pitching chose me. I was trying to find my way in this little fantasy realm. I was writing for Free at Roto Analysis, and I know there was a lot of Discord. Twitter this week as a whole has just been kind of a cesspool between the drama at NFBC, and there at the beginning of the week it started with people getting paid or not and things of that nature, and it's all difficult. And I've been grinding away at this since 2013 when I was doing stuff at Roto Analysis. I got my first paid gig like a year and a half later, and things just kind of rolled. But choosing this niche was just kind of a way that I kind of separated myself from other people. I'm more of a meat and potatoes guy, so this is going to be more of a where saves have been and where we think they're going to go this year. I only prepared like 58 slides, so I hope you guys are ready for all of this wonderfulness. If I get through them all, that'll be a wonderful thing. So the first slide you can see here is we're talking about the trends since 2017. Obviously looking at the last 5 years, we omit 2020 just because of the short season. It's just kind of goofy to try and glean any information from that. It was such a wild and kind of an outlier sort of a season. But the one thing we noticed last year is we did get fewer relievers or pitchers recording a save. We also had an appreciable drop in relievers getting at least 5. So we're starting to see a little bit of shift. As much as teams were talking about they wanted to be more matchup based or do things in more, matching up lineup pockets. And it was a lot more noise than actual results. And again, we did see a slight uptick in relievers getting at least 10 saves last year. The big jump happens at 20. We had 5 more relievers get 20 or more saves in 2023. We also had a rise in relievers getting 30, and we just missed, matching the 2017, 2018, because we had 2 guys fall just short with 39 saves in Bednar and Doval, but we almost had 3 relievers with 40 or more. So as we start to get through this, and what we want to think about is not just am I winning saves in my league, but am I being competitive? And I think that's where we kind of lose sight on this, because we're chasing saves, and if you're not paying for them on draft day or in your auction, then you're kind of on that negative FOD train where you're trying to cycle through. And last year, in the draft and hold contest, the save totals were up. So that means there was a lot fewer saves to be found on the waiver wire in 2023 as compared to previous seasons. That doesn't mean it's going to be foreshadowing for 2024, but it's something we have to file away in the back of our minds and think about that as we keep moving all of these things forward. So I don't want to sit on this slide all day, and hopefully you've taken all of that in. So I also like to use at Reliever Recon, we talk about games finished, and it's a really easy stat. It's just who pitches last in the game for a team. And I've seen some people are a little bit wary about Emmanuel Clase, but if he's not traded, I mean, he is sort of just such a stable force in high leverage events just by volume. Yes, his whip was higher last year. He had a really, really bad luck with BABIP and things of that nature. His velocity was never the same. His slider didn't have the same shape. His swing strike percentages dropped with all of those things. But this is somebody that's only entering his age 26 season. It's a little too early to be kicking dirt on a guy that can throw 100 miles an hour. If he comes out this spring and he's sitting a half tick above where he was last spring, all season long, we were like, when's Clase's velocity going to go? As the weather heats up, he usually does the same, and it never really happened. But I mean, look at that, a 20 difference between his games finished to Camilo Doval over the last 2 seasons. I know we don't want to ignore it, but, or make too much of it. However, I mean, that's a pretty substantial amount. Last year, his save percentage was way down. I mean, he had 12 blown saves. I mean, you cut that in half. And you're talking about he's got 48 saves last year. I mean, that's a big number. He had a realistic chance to run at 50. So that's something we really, really have to think about. It's tough seeing Ryan Presley on this list and right below him, Josh Hader, because now they're going to be on the same team. That kind of changes our valuations of them. What's Boston going to do with Kenley Jansen? These are things we'll explore as this keeps going forward, but there's some really good names on here. If Raisel Iglesias is healthy, he could be somebody that people can be putting those early props on to be the NL saves leader, because Atlanta is just a factory for saves. And if he's healthy, they're just going to accumulate for him. We just see them as such a stable leverage ladder that it can't be ignored. Now, let's take a little gander here. So this was just last year. And again, you still see a sizable difference. It's only 6, but we just notice how all those things happen there. David Bednar, we still got Alexis Diaz. He had a bunch of them. For as bad as Carlos Estevez was in the second half, he still got a bunch of games finished working for the Angels. Whether that happens this year with Robert Stevenson added in the mix is just another a question we have to think about. I'm wearing the orange and black today in memory of the Mountain. I will miss him this year, but reliever Recon and myself, we were banging the drum for Felix Bautista all preseason. He helped me be victorious in tout wars. So I am indebted to him, and the strikeouts that he provided was just a game changer last year. That was a real separating force between him and other relievers. There's a few surprises on here, like, Kyle Finnegan. I'm always on team fade Finnegan, and it bit me in the tuchus last year, but I'll probably jump right back on that train, but I don't want to give away what's coming up later in the presentation. One thing that really kind of struck me, and obviously the advent of the pitch clock is something that we couldn't quantify going into the season, how it was going to affect. I mean, we can speculate on, like, Kenley Jansen was a slow worker. He's going to have to adjust to the pitch clock. And now this year they're even doing it more. They're still keeping it lower with runners on base. So it's going to be, again, I really think it fatigued a lot of the veterans in the second half. And you can see that as you're looking, from May forward, all of the whips by month, the league average was above 1.3 for relievers. And that's just something, most of us should have seen it in our leagues when we're looking at the end of the year standings, and we noticed that whip was higher across the board. It was for starting pitchers, and it was for relievers as well. And that's something we're going to have to kind of maybe bake into our projections as we're going forward, looking at 2024 and the years ahead. Now, minor league pitchers are a little more adept to it, but I just think the 162 game grind, no matter what Anthony Rendon says, I know we would all give up whatever we could to figure out how bad it was, but that's just something that we have to start considering when we're doing all these things. So this one is a fun one. I try and really hone in on, I keep a separate chart of my own with the game finish percentages. And then we also have K minus BB of 20% or greater. And we have a save percentage of at least 80 in this thing. So that's the percentage of saves on their team. So, of their team total. All right. So again, we've only got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 relievers on this list. And we've only got one of these is not going to be on it this year. Now, obviously, Edwin Diaz coming back, and I had to kind of fudge the numbers so he could still appear there. But I still think he's slightly overlooked. I know people are worried about the knee and landing and things of that nature. But I think the trumpets will be sounding at least sometimes. I mean, he's only got 32 saves in 2021, 2022. I think that's a good baseline when you're looking at him moving forward. But this is just kind of locking us in. Liam Hendricks will be out for the season. I'm still curious to see if a team like Texas might sign him to a 2-year deal so they can have him next year in the bullpen. We don't know how someone's going to handle that, but it's a shame that we lost the Aussie there. He's a great presence. And just going into last year, same kind of chart here. We lowered the save share percentage down so we can get a couple of guys included. Devin Williams had a fantastic year. I don't think I have to tell you that. He finished first among this group in K minus BB percentage. He's solid. He's going to be going in the top 3 picks of relievers in most of your drafts, which should not be a surprise. People are trying to wrap their head around what's going to happen with Robert Stevenson. He's entering his age 31 season. Do we buy into the Tampa Bay tweak? And can he carry over, Lance Brzezowski and some other people are kind of trying to classify the cutter versus the slider. Is his cutter just a faster slider, which you can see there was not in this slide, but there was a 3 mile per hour difference when you start farming out and mining those numbers. So it's something, and we don't know how this new Angel staff is going to handle relievers. Will they be savvy enough with these pitch mixes and the tweaks that pitchers have made and help them be better? Because last year, I don't really think they helped Estevez, having him shelve the changeup again, and not having that extra pitch in the second half, I really think hurt him. We don't want to focus too much on the second half, but we just like to look at the people who jumped up. Now, Stevenson was the only one to improve in all 4 of these categories across the board. That's K minus BB percentage, swinging strike rate, contact rate allowed, and strike percentage. However, all of these relievers qualified in 3 out of those 4. And you'll see a bunch of these guys are not closers. And that's where part of the game has changed. So those of us that play in like save plus holds leagues, you can kind of hold out a little bit and get some of these guys that will help protect your ratios, because you're getting the best relievers, not necessarily somebody that is just locked into the 9th inning. I think saves will stay a traditional baseline category in most leagues, but it's things like this kind of makes these relievers stand out. So what we tried to do here is standing games points, just basically how these relievers impacted the end of the year standings. What did they do for your team? This is a little hard to read because it's smaller on here than when I have it on my site and other things. But basically, I use Fantasy Pros because I don't want to be just NFBC centric. A lot of our subscribers at Recon play on NFBC. However, people use all kinds of different outlets, whether it be Yahoo, CBS. We don't want to just paint people into a corner. So we use the ADP rank there, what their ADP was last season, how many saves they got, their K minus BB rate, and then the whip that they turned in. And again, we look on this, there's not a lot of relievers with low whips. The guys with a whip below 1 are getting harder and harder to find. You got Bautista and D-Will right at the top. You've got Evan Phillips, who has actually had a whip below 1 each of the last 2 seasons while with the Dodgers, and he's kind of an underappreciated leverage reliever. We never trust the Dodgers and what they're going to do with saves, but they kind of gave him the primary save share. There was days where he faced the toughest pocket when they were playing games that they really cared about when it impacted the standings. But for the most part, he was working in the 9th inning most of the season. And it's good to see, because I think he's somebody that you're going to see now that LA didn't add Hader and things of that nature, that his ADP is going to start to creep up as the season gets closer. And we get down there to the bottom there, and you see Kevin Ginkel helps with ratios and other stuff. Adbert Alzolay had a very under-the-radar season, although he missed time in September when the Cubs needed them the most. But, again, that's more fodder for later. This one's straight by ADP and draft order. So, again, when we look at there, only Ryan Helsley really kind of busted, and it wasn't all his fault. He was shut down with the forearm strain, so he missed a good part of the season. It's not all his fault, but as we talk about this, I remember years ago, it was, Alex Foss was on here telling us that we're drafting saves wrong, but we've gotten a lot better in the last few years. And this chart really kind of shows that, there wasn't a lot of undrafted people, but no one was really taking Tanner Scott because AJ Puck was going to be the closer at the opening of the season for the Marlins. So there was no reason to take him. So you can't anticipate something of that nature unless you're in the draft and hold league and you're backing them up. But you're looking at that top heavy with the green there. It's pretty appreciable. We did a much, much better job after you see Helsley here. It takes a little while. Clay Holmes, he still had a pretty good amount, although, people would have hoped for more. It wasn't until we get down to this range that we started to see some busts. And I'm going to go through a lot of that in 5-round pockets in a moment. Now, the one nice thing about NFBC is that we can really mine the data from their site. So what I like to do is I'm trying to keep this more 12-team specific. Obviously, I play in 15 leagues, mostly myself, but most of us are playing 10 or 12-team leagues. So I wanted to keep it a little more for the people. So the online championship is a 12-team league with FAB if you don't play on NFBC, and they do an overall component. So of the top 25 teams, I went through and mined this data. And I want you to remember these because I'm going to compare these with CBS in a couple of moments. Chris Towers at CBS was kind enough to share some information from their site about save totals and standings that kind of really relates with this when we're trying to formulate a draft or auction strategy. So now we're looking at these top 25 teams. They average 75 saves on those teams. And they averaged about 9 points. So basically they finished, most of these teams finished on average 4th in their league in saves. They didn't have to lead the league in saves to finish in the top 25 of the overall. It's not like I'm saying, no one's saying you have to go out and take 2 relievers in your first 100 picks. That's really not the way we want to do things. Now, will you want to get an anchor for your team? I think that's very likely. Once you get past a certain point, it's going to be very hard to protect your ratios and accrue those saves that you need for your season-long totals by ignoring them too long. However, this kind of goes against the old never pay for saves. I think you have to pay for at least one. And I think that's something that people really, really, really need to adjust to as they're changing their mindset when they're thinking about the save category. It was very hard. One team in this tried to punt, but he did not finish in the top 10, and it's very hard to do when you do that. So the 80th percentile number is not too far from the average save total from those top 25 teams. You got 76 versus 75.1. So in a 12-team league, you're kind of thinking about as a baseline, I'm trying to draft or auction my way to 70 plus saves. And then as the season goes, if an injury happens, you can adjust. But I think that's kind of what you want to be thinking about. It's not, don't make the numbers more than they need to be. And in a 15-team league, I think you drop that number a little bit. You're thinking about, I would say 65. That's kind of a number you want to kind of draw in the sand, say, I want to walk away thinking I can project myself towards 65 saves, and I'm going to be right near in the top third of my league and remain competitive in the points. So I couldn't get away to show the exact numbers when I was using the data wrapper thing, but this is the difference with CBS. So, and I'm going to have the numbers in a moment for you with a little bonus preview of my puppies. So the first place team on this, it was 91. All right. But when you look at 4, I mean, 4 is not too far from third, but there was an appreciable gap from 4 to 5 in the standings and the save total. However, when we look at that number, we get ourselves right back to the 70 range, 71. So of the league winners in CBS, they averaged, for the 4th place spot in CBS leagues was 71 saved. I got a little ahead of myself there. I apologize. However, again, that's kind of there. So if you look at the average between 71 and 79, it's putting you right again at that 75 number that we've been speaking about. Before I go too far, this was my old buddy Riley. We had to put him to sleep a year ago, August, but he used to sit right next to me at the thing where I do my morning research for Reliever Recon. And then that's John curled up. He's my guy for in the back room when I'm watching the games till about 1 a.m. to see what's happening. So I'm prepared for all of that wonderful stuff that happens on the day-to-day basis when I'm covering relievers. I do a once a week column on The Athletic, but Reliever Recon, there's daily updates and daily emails for all of our subscribers that I break down all of this information for them. So anyways, one of the best players in the world is Steve Weimer, and he shared this concept with Rob DiPietro and I about looking at drafts in 5-round pockets. So if we're looking at the 12-team drafts in NFBC last year, and I've got the last 3 years included on this slide, this shows how many relievers were taken in each of those 5-round pockets. So rounds 1 through 5, last year there was only 4 relievers taken, and I'll have those broken down for you as these progress. But you see there's a huge jump this year. Now, even though saves are more stable because you're seeing them pushing up in the early drafts. Like the first OC of the season for 2024, 9 relievers were taken in the first 5 rounds. Now, again, that may stabilize or reduce a little bit, especially with Hader signing. Will probably knock Presley out of that area. Doesn't mean another reliever won't replace him, because a lot of times that happens. One goes down, another one moves up and fills into his slot, kind of like the blocks. But this is, again, as we go forward here. So last year there was 8 in rounds 6 through 10, 9 in rounds 11 through 15. So at the end of the 15th round, you've already got 21 relievers selected in most drafts last year. That number's a smidge lower this year, but only at 21. But then you see it spikes right back up, and that's 16 to 20. So there's a little bit of different. It's a little stronger at the top and a little weaker in the middle. And I think you're going to see that as draft season draws near. It's something we're going to have to plan on and kind of anticipate. But that's also a range where if you like somebody with a early 16, round 16 to 20 ADP, and you like them, just push them up into the 15th round and make sure you get them on your roster. There's nothing worse when you're playing ADP chicken, and then the guy that you want gets sniped right ahead of you, and then you make a panic pick. I mean, that's know your spots and kind of where you want to get people, identify those pockets and hammer them in. So last year, the first 4, okay, they did very, very well. Again, Clase, Hader, Romano, Devin Williams, they averaged between them 37 saves. I mean, that's part of the reason why you're paying for them. Their average whip was 1.10. Again, this was a strong group. Okay. Round 6 through 10 did very well. Again, we talked about Helsley being like the only guy we kind of missed on last year. I mean, even with knowing Iglesias was going to be hurt at the start of the season, he still got in there and grabbed 33 saves. I mean, that's just a crazy total for the amount of games that he appeared in. And again, I think he's kind of I think people are cautious because it was a shoulder issue, but if he's healthy all spring, he's somebody whose ADP will probably be changing as we go forward. Duvall did very well until he had those 4 blown saves in a row in August. Kenley Jansen had a solid season. I didn't have any shares of him, but he did better than I planned on him doing. He just keeps on going. It's kind of amazing. David Bednar had a breakout season. Obviously, you're not going to be getting him near the 10th round this year. That has expired. This year's it guy seems to be Yohan Duran. He's just wonderfully. That was somebody I completely missed on last year, not because he's talented, but because I thought the Twins would not turn him loose, but they kind of had to with Jorge Lopez struggling during the season, and Duran graduated from being the highest leverage reliever to being a dominant lockdown closer. And in the second half, he only had 1 outing requiring more than 3 outs. So they really started to streamline his appearances, which we'll hint at later when I go through team by team things. This one had a lot more bust in it, though. Scott Barlow could not replicate what he did the season before. Daniel Bard was bust city, and it's a shame, especially because he went through some personal issues, which we don't wish upon anybody. Sewald had a great year. I had the misfortune of taking Munoz in a draft when I could have taken him or Sewald. And from a save standpoint, I obviously made the wrong decision. Luckily, I was still able to win that league, but you can overcome a mistake when it's your second reliever and not your first. So I think Pete Fairbanks, as much as people were disappointed, he still turned in a career high saves, career high innings, career high strikeouts. I mean, I don't know how much more we can expect from him. I think this year, if we can get 55 innings out of him, that would be a huge plus. Steamer loves him. I just don't know that he's got 65 innings in his DNA. That's just something we just have to plan on as we go forward. And it's obviously not intentional, but it is kind of ironic that you see Jose Leclerc and David Robertson next to each other in this ADP pocket because now they are teammates. And this is going to be a tough one. Last year, Bochy had a very, very short leash for Leclerc, who apparently was, Leclerc said he was pitching through some injuries early in the season, which affected his performance. But, Bochy went to Will Smith really fast, really fast. So I don't know if he'll do the same or if Bochy just has proclivity towards veteran relievers with closer experience. But, we're one day removed from people feeling really good about Leclerc at his ADP to now we're like, what are we going to do with David Robertson in town? So that's going to be interesting to see how that evolves through spring. This group did well from a save standpoint. Now we start to see a little bit more. Evan Phillips cleans up some of the whip in this group. You see Lang and Finnegan both have a 1.3. So the aggregate average says, okay, this group was solid, but it was really Phillips. He did the heavy lifting. And when we're trying to think about what can a reliever do from our ratios, Phillips paints it right here for you. Again, he won't have the same save ceiling as other relievers. However, his ability to be a ratio eraser is fantastic. And I think he kind of gets undervalued because of this. We just never know how many wins, or not wins, but how many saves the Dodgers are going to provide because they win a lot of games via blowout, especially with adding Ohtani and the other things. But if the pitcher's only going like 5 innings and the bullpen gets involved, it could help insulate Phillips' save totals. If he could reach 30 this year, that would be fantastic. I'm not planning on it, but that would be a little boost to his overall value. Now, as we start to drift in the draft, and we get to this pocket, this is our next to last pocket in a 30-round draft in the NFBC format. Things get a little dicier here. People were on Seranthony Dominguez last year. He could not replicate what he did the season before. And this is the volatility that is just inherent with relievers. Craig Kimbrell did much better than anybody planned on. He was a terrific bargain here. If people paired Minter with Iglesias, then you're talking they just got 43 saves between those two Braves relievers. That's how you pocket or how you attach these relievers in your build can help you if you canvas a bullpen, especially if you know it's going to be a handoff. You use Minter till you can't. You replace them with Iglesias, and then you cut Minter and add something to your team that you need moving forward. It can be very good, and you don't want to handcuff too many. You don't want to do this with multiple bullpens. But if you're going to do this with a bullpen in your build, I think it can help, especially if you're unsure of which one will do it. Now, the hard part is you don't want to do it where it's two guys competing like Estevez and Stevenson. You kind of got to pick a side, taking them both, unless you're okay with dropping whichever one doesn't have it at the opening of the season. The unfortunate thing is you might not be able to add the person if he replaces the other. That's always the tricky part when we're doing the churn and burn with relievers. So not a lot of surprises here. And then as we go to the last 5-round pocket, a lot of people at the end of March were kind of targeting people in this area. And it's a shame because you see Trevor May on here too, another reliever who went through some personal stuff. And I think he's a great Twitter follow, just like a guy full of personality, great person. You hate to see anybody dealing with personal things in season. And it's amazing. I know a lot of people were upset about what happened, how Puck kind of imploded in the second half. But I mean, same thing. If you mind those 15 saves and then cut bait before he completely went nuclear, you still came out ahead at his price point. So that was last year. So now I'm going to try and go through team by team. And what I try and do here is, we do have people that subscribe to Recon that play Souls leagues, so we do not ignore them. If you're playing in a Souls league, you want pitchers, relievers, like the 7th and 8th inning guys on very good teams. I mean, look at the volume that Baltimore put forth. Cleveland, just because of the way that their team is built, they play a lot of close games. Detroit was kind of a surprise, and they could be a sleeper team this year if you're in this format trying to look at that. But I go through all these things. You can see the save numbers. Obviously it's hard to really maximize an Oakland reliever, but Trevor May converted 15 out of 16 saves in the second half when he got back. You just have to hope that you're able to add him before that little bit of run came your way. So I also do all of these things on the site by team. So Baltimore has named, or at least the general manager has said that Craig Kimbrell is going to be the primary. They added him to be the primary save share. He's going to get most of the save chances unless he can't handle the role, which, if you draft Craig Kimbrell and you get 25 saves, I think you're going to be more than happy with everything else that kind of comes with it. You kind of go in with eyes wide open as a second reliever in your build. I still think he's solid. He's one of 2 relievers that had more than 20 saves and at least 90 strikeouts last year with the guy he's replacing, Felix Bautista. So, there's that. Okay, the Red Sox. Now, we don't know what's going to happen with Boston. They've talked about that maybe they're definitely going to trade Kenley Jansen. Is it going to be before the season or is it going to be at the trade deadline? So that kind of impacts his save total and how we're going to view him. I mean, I think you can still use him as a second reliever. I know some people think Chris Martin is a sleeper, but he's also a free agent at the end of the season. So he could also find himself being traded. So I don't know what's going to happen there. I kind of have a good feeling about Garrett Whitlock here. I don't know that he has the DNA to be a starting pitcher. His ratios as a reliever compared to a starter there's a stark contrast. He's much, much better as a reliever. And I think if the team does move on from Jansen, even though Baker said that he believes that more than one person can be getting saves, that Whitlock would be the guy I would, if they trade Jansen, I would hope that Whitlock would get 55 to 60% save share. I don't think it's going to be higher than that based on what Baker was saying, but I think it's something to keep an eye on as spring training progresses. The White Sox are probably going to be a tire fire. It's hard to recommend you really going after somebody. I mean, Santos really flashed some skills at the end of the season before he was shut down, but there's conflicting reports about if he'll be ready for opening day, which makes it difficult to spend even a late pick on him until we have a better idea. I'd like to see him throw and see some velocity and really get a feel. If you're playing in a deep draft and hold or 15 team, and you want to take a last round pick on John Brebbia, you might be able to steal a few saves in weeks where you have touch matchups. But and then we don't know what they're going to do with Crochet. Is he going? They're saying they're going to try and use him like they did Kopech when he was coming back from injury. So they might try and build his innings as they go. He can end up taking the Michael King path. It's hard to say. But once they said that, it was hard to count on him being the primary save share. Same thing kind of goes here for Cleveland. It's strange to think that they've been talking or at least listening to offers about Emmanuel Clase, but they have. Now, he's still fairly inexpensive this year, and I think next. But after that, his contract clauses kind of rise closer to the $10 million and $10 million plus ranges. So Cleveland might be eyeing that, and they want to sell high. You don't know that baseball teams think like as fantasy players, but in the event that happens, there's a guy in AA, last name's Ailman. That's somebody, again, if you're in a dynasty or draft and hold, that's a name you kind of want to file away. Big guy, kind of like Clase as well, tall, imposing, nasty pitch mix. So, they do have somebody coming down, and they traded for Barlow to have a little bit of insurance in case some of these things happen. But he'll be a free agent at the end of the season too. So that's why I'll be curious to see how they handle. If Clase stays in Cleveland, it's hard to say he won't get another 40 save season. I really think his BABIP will come back, but it's all about velocity. Really, really monitor his velocity in spring. And just see where it is compared to last spring, not where it is now, because his velocity usually increases by a month as the season progresses. Detroit's another curious one. Alex Lang had an awful walk rate. He had the job, then he kind of lost the job, then he got the job back after people dropped him, and it was it seemed like Evan Petzold of the Detroit Free Press really pushed Jason Foley on us, and people were adding him, and then he didn't really get the saves and yada, yada, yada. Anyways, I'm curious about Shelby Miller. I don't know if he can stay healthy, but how he pitched as a reliever with the Dodgers is encouraging. Again, he's in all of these, Miller and Lang both have walk issues. So whoever has the better K to BB in spring, I just don't know that Foley and the amount of contact he gives up can really last in an extended look as a closer on a team. I think he's better off is coming in and trying to get double plays with runners on and things of that nature with that heavy sinker. I don't think he has the swing and miss stuff to be a closer, but I could be wrong. So Houston, the $64,000 question here is, are they really going to pay Josh Hader all that money to be their highest leverage reliever and just face the toughest pocket lineup when games are happening? I mean, he got paid, so he's really not going to argue about the inning, but I don't think he's really going to go back to being a multiple inning reliever. He claims he needs to do 1 innings to stay healthy. And I think that's going to stay the case. I'm sure he, in his negotiation, was like, I'll come here, I'll do what you want, whether it's 8th or 9th inning, as long as you pay me, and I'm pitching 1 inning outings. So I think that's something we have to plan on. When I was doing the save projections for this team at Recon, I really struggled and wrestled. I think I've changed it multiple times. I kind of have Hader at 32, Presley between 7 and 9, and then Abreu picking up a couple along the way. I mean, this is just an unbelievable high leverage triumvirate with those 3 relievers. How Houston and the new manager Espada handles them is another matter for another day. And please make sure you plan on some regression in Hader's ERA. The Royals are another interesting case. James McCarthy had a great end of the season, racked up 4 saves in September, had an unbelievable outing against the Astros, striking out Yordan Alvarez. It's funny that, he kind of caught my attention. However, Kansas City is putting it out into the world that they're trying to trade for a closer, which, again, doesn't really help you from a leverage standpoint in negotiations, but that's where we're at. So they brought in Will Smith. They also traded for Nick Anderson. John McMillan's a hard-throwing prospect who could make an impact in leverage innings as the year progresses. Long story short, this could change hand multiple times, so it's probably best you leave it to somebody else to figure out. The Angels, we've already intimated about this, whether it's Stevenson or Estevez. Estevez is a free agent at the end of the season. Stevenson signed a 3-year deal, so this might be Los Angeles is going to start out with Estevez getting the first run in the 9th inning. If he can't handle it, they can pivot to Stevenson and use, Matt Moore a little bit more often in those things. I mean, if Jose Quijada doesn't get Tommy John surgery last year, he might have overtaken Estevez, and we didn't even had last year's results. So it's a slippery slope here. I don't know that I'm going to be willing to take Estevez, and as Stevenson's draft capital keeps climbing, he might also be moving out of what I'm comfortable paying. So the Twins, they went against all conventional wisdom. Years and years, I've complained about the Twins being cheap about arbitration and saves. And then last year, they just turned over the keys of the kingdom to Yohan Duran. So, I mean, you could do worse things than let Duran be who he is, which is a dominant reliever. I intimated this in a preseason article at FTN for my good friend Vlad Sedler. And we said that Duran's kind of on a path that Bautista was in 2022. So if there's a breakout guy that kind of just turns in his first 100+ K season, it could be him. In the postseason, he was just absolute filthy. He changed his pitch mix a little bit, and he was just a force. If we can get that level of performance over the full season in 2024, I think you could see him do just some unbelievable things. So I'm all aboard. The Yankees, Clay Holmes, I had a tweet a couple of days ago about, people who drafted Evan Phillips and Clay Holmes were avoiding all the landmines. And it's true. There's really not a lot here that can usurp him from the primary save share. It's just a matter of, how he performs. He can be up and down, and sometimes he gets some bad luck BABIP and the sinker gets hit around, but he still can, 68 plus ground ball percentage with the Yankees. I mean, and he's in a walk year. So, I mean, you're going to probably get the best that you can get from Holmes. Does it mean he'll get 30 saves? I'm not sure, just based on the way the Yankees have done things the last couple of years. But even a repeat of last year's 24, I think where he's going is a very reasonable amount. So Oakland's going to be interesting. We've got Mason Miller, who he could be the Yohan Duran from 2022 this year. A starting pitching prospect that can't stay healthy moves to the bullpen and becomes a dominant force. Does that mean Oakland will use him as a HLR, highest leverage reliever? Will they use him exclusively as a closer? Are they trying to build his innings? So there's a couple of ways this can go, and that's what I kind of use these next two slides for. So as a rookie in 2022, you can see Duran's pitch count kind of varies as you go through the season, like an EKG, and it kind of settled as it went. But he had a bunch of multiple inning outings, and this was kind of the team getting a feel for him in leverage moments, and also using him at the biggest points of the game against toughest lineups, tough lineup pockets. So this is one way it could go. Now, if they want Miller to be a starter in 2025 and he's healthy after like the first half of the season, which is, right around this area for Michael King, and we start trying to build his pitch count, and then the Yankees kind of use him back to back out of necessity with some injuries. And then you see this steep climb and climb and climb at the end of the season, when a lot of us who added him were lucky enough to reap the benefits of his results when he moved into the rotation for the Yankees. So how Oakland uses him is really going to dictate the ceiling for Miller. Do I think he could get 20 saves? Absolutely. I think the talent's there. Steamer projections believe in him, and his blended projection is still very strong. It's just a matter of how Oakland deploys him. That's what we can't answer. Hopefully how we see his pitch count in spring and future quotes will give us a better idea. But I spoke at First Pitch Arizona about Miller possibly being used as a reliever, and a few people panned me on it, but it appears that's going to be the course of action. Seattle. So you can see Seattle when you look at like 2021 with the amount of relievers getting at least a save, and then 5 saves, and then 10 saves, and there's a bunch. 2022 was more normal, as was 2023. Even before they traded Sewald, Munoz was hurt, so he really got full run as the closer. And then, of course, they traded him because he's arbitration eligible, and Sewald's another guy who'll be a free agent at the end of the season, which is going to be a common theme. There's a lot of people that are going to be free agents at the end of this year. So just like we say, once you get comfortable with the reliever landscape, they move the field goal on us, so the goalpost. So anyways, if Munoz is healthy, it's very possible that Seattle does to him what Minnesota did with Duran last year, and really make him more of a closer, or at least keep his outings in the 9th inning, and shortening them and keeping them to 1 inning outings. If that happens, then Munoz is probably going a little too cheap in drafts. But again, we're baking in the injury past with missed time last year as well. So he's like your ultimate high risk, high reward guy at his current price point. But if he even gets slight migration back towards his 2022 results over a full season, I think people will be very pleased, especially if you take him as your second reliever. You can end up with 27 saves, very good ratios, and a bunch of strikeouts. How you pair him, I think, is very important. So if you've got Clase, who you think is a stable reliever, but he doesn't give you a lot of strikeouts, if you pair him with Munoz, that's a pretty nice build, especially in a 12-team league. How you put these pieces together always helps you get to the end game when you're looking at those championship flags at the end of the season. Tampa Bay, another one, they stabilized. They gave Fairbanks the money, so they didn't have to play around with arbitration. And when he was healthy, he was getting save chances. We still have to pay attention to the Raynaud syndrome that he battled. But again, I quoted his career highs on the year. I had him on a couple of teams. I had no complaints other than that time he missed. He was on the injured list the first time. I got outbid on Jason Adam, which I could have been a little smarter about in my fab bidding, but that's not for you to worry about. The Rangers I already spoke about. We don't know what's going to happen with Leclerc and Robertson. Beat writers are intimating, but I want to hear it from Chris Young and Bruce Bochy. They're intimating that Leclerc will open the season as the closer. There's been a lot of words thrown around about dominant in the postseason, but his K-minus BB wasn't dominant. It was below 20. He gave up 3 home runs. I mean, Josh Zabor's was actually better in the postseason than Leclerc when you look at the numbers. I'm just not sold on Leclerc. He could be okay. I just get nervous about Bochy going back to his stripes and sticking with a veteran. So if Leclerc struggles with his command in April, you're probably looking at D-Rob save chances from that point forward. I put his blended projection up there just as something to look at. I compared him now. Again, last year Leclerc got demoted, but high leverage appearances, between the Mets and the Marlins, D-Rob had 30, Leclerc only had 16. You look at the K-minus BB, it still slightly favors Robertson, even though he's older. I know he's going to his age 39 season. It's just, I don't know. It just feels like deja vu all over again, especially when you're looking at the projection systems really inflating that whip for Leclerc. I don't know what they know that we don't, but it's something you have to keep in the back of your mind if you're taking them. Last in the American League is Toronto with Jordan Romano. He's solid. They've really built up this bullpen. Chad Green will be a guy we stream a lot to get vulture wins or ancillary saves. If he's healthy, I think he's a game changer in that bullpen. All right, the National League, and I'm going to have to get a little faster here because I'm running out of time. My goodness, I can talk about these relievers for too long. All right, anyways, National League, again, I talked to you about Atlanta. Look at that, 52 saves last year. Out of their 104 wins, that again, I told you, they're just a factory. 100 holds, 152 solds. I mean, it's just nuts. And then you look at Milwaukee, same thing. They're kind of like the Cleveland of the NL, play closer games, have a good bullpen, 149 there. So let's go rapid fire here. Arizona, it's Paul Sewell's job. Hopefully he does much better. After early struggles when he got there with sweeper, he found his stride and kept it through the playoffs. But again, free agent at the end of the season. If for some reason Arizona fades in the standings, they could look to deal him before the deadline, which opens the door for Kevin Ginkel, who had a breakout last year. Raisel Iglesias, if he's healthy, I think he'll get 40 saves. If he's not, I think Pierce Johnson will be the next in line. I know people still think it'll be Minter, but Pierce was very, very good after that trade from Colorado. Get out of that high air that and Nick were talking about. Get a lot better bite on that curveball. The Reds, Alexis Diaz was absolutely fantastic until September 15th, and then the wheels fell off the bus. The Reds rode him very hard, and I think he just got exhausted, and it showed. So it affects his final numbers, but he's the best in that bunch by a large margin, so I'm not too worried about him remaining the primary save share, and I think he should be fine. The Rockies are like the Royals and a couple other bullpens. I'm going to let somebody else deal with this, Even if you take a late stab on Tyler Kinley or Justin Lawrence, how many saves you're going to get and how good of ratios are you going to get? I don't think it's worth it in a 12-team league. Adbert Alzolay had a terrific year. Now, he's had some injury issues in the past. Can we trust him? If he can't stay healthy, then we've got Julian Merriweather waiting in the wings, and I still think they're going to add somebody. And I also really like what Drew Smiley did as a reliever. If he gets more leverage opportunities, if Alzolay goes down, you could see Merriweather and Smiley sharing save chances at that point. Craig Counsell's pretty good at managing bullpens. The Dodgers, I already told you how great Evan Phillips is. Gratterall will get saves here and there. He grabbed 7 ancillary saves last year on days that Phillips needs off and things of that nature. They really manage workloads well. The Marlins, Tanner Scott had an unbelievable second half. His command rates really improved. He almost took the same jump that Ryan Helsley did in 2022. So if he repeats that early on, he's going to be terrific. But he's also a free agent at the end of the season. And if Miami is not competing, they are probably going to be trading him. So get as many saves you can, but he's much more alluring in a league where you can make trades or have free agency additions. Devin Williams agreed to a pretty team-friendly contract, buying out his arbitration years. He won't be a free agent until the end of next year. However, if the Brewers struggle out of the gate and they decide to have a fire sale, him and Corbin Burnes could be moved before the trade deadline. That's just something. Same thing with Scott. You're going to get terrific production. It's just a matter of, wherever Williams goes, he's probably going to end up closing anyways. But he was an elite setup reliever too and has that in his background, which teams may like. Edwin's back, and I'm all on board. The Phillies, there's a lot of love for Jose Alvarado. He did have 2 separate stints on the injured list, so just keep that in the back of your mind. I think Hoffman could be a sneaky play here. Orion Kirkering, the team likes, but he really, really, really relies on his slider/sweeper. So I don't know. You can see teams having much better looks the second time they saw him in the postseason. I think there's some growing pains ahead, although he's talented. Bednar's a stud. Pittsburgh should sign him, and they picked up Chapman to set up for him. And if they're competing, they'll keep him. If not, they're going to flip Chapman. I don't know if they'll get the same thing as Kansas City did with Reagans, but they're going to hope. So this is Robert Suarez versus Yuki Matsui versus Woo-Suk Go. At the beginning of the season, it sounds like Suarez will get the first opportunity to be the closer. Do we get 2022 big game Bobby, or do we get the 2023 iteration that struggled with command and gave up home runs at too high of a rate? Will the changeup bounce back? I think is the key question here. He could get 15 saves and he could get 5, just kind of depends. And I think Matsui and Go, just like Suarez in 2022, there's an adjustment period in the major leagues. So they may struggle in April. If you have them, just be patient. It's one of those things where if you do a quick drop, you might regret it as the year progresses. Probably more Matsui than Go at the get-go. No pun intended. The Giants, Doval is fantastic. If he gets the slider back to where it was in 2022, I don't have too many worries about him. There's no one in this bullpen that threatens me. Helsley, it's all about health. Can he stay healthy the whole season? I don't know. When he's healthy, he's fantastic. He finished the year strong. His spring will be very, very big as far as determining what his final ADP ends up at. The Nationals, as I told you, I'm on team fade Finnegan. I really think it's like Charlie Brown, Lucy with the football and Charlie Brown getting ready to kick. I'm ready to be Charlie again. One of these years, Hunter Harvey's going to prove me right. So I think this is the year. So it would not surprise me at all if Hunter Harvey leads his team in saves. And he had a very good whip below 1 last year when he was, he kind of took the role from Finnegan, and then he had to get shut down for a couple of weeks, and then Finnegan got hot. And then when he came back, he was put back into a setup role. Eventually I think this team needs to trade one of them. They'll probably move Finnegan, but we'll have to see how all that shakes out. So holy cow, Adam, I got through it all. All right. So if you liked what I was talking about here, again, Greg Jewett at GJEWETT9 on X. You can find Reliever Recon. It's on Patreon. If you just search Reliever Recon, I'm sure it'll kick you to that page. Articles will start soon for The Athletic. And I'm looking forward to having a great season.